Proverbs 14:17. A quick-tempered man acts foolishly. You ever watch somebody lose their cool? A quick-tempered man acts foolishly. Proverbs 14:29. He who is impulsive exalts folly. We are in Proverbs on Sunday night, so we said that we're devoting the different months to different topics or different themes. So we're devoting the month of May. What is this month? The month of May to emotions. We're dealing with emotions. So do you remember what we dealt with last week, if you were with us last week? Okay, good. One person. Happiness is what we talked about last week. And so tonight, we're going to talk about anger, all right? We're going to talk about anger. Now, I think that anger is an unprecedented high. I want to tell you a little bit of my experience. As most of you know, I have a part-time side job. I work for FedEx Express, and I go around and I pick up packages. At night, I clock in about 3 o'clock, and I work till about 7:45 every day. And my route is on Wanamaker. It's on basically anything from Fairlawn to Urish Road. If anybody calls in, I go pick stuff up, documents mostly, but anything that people want to pick up. So if you are familiar with Wanamaker and the 21st Street in particular, they've shut down the bridge that crosses over 21st to take you to Wanamaker, and they're doing it for a month and I'm totally good with it. I guess it doesn't really matter if I'm good with it or not, but I'm good with them shutting down a bridge for a month and dealing with the issue, and then rather than taking 9 months to do it. But it has created a lot of issues. It's created a lot of issues. So I have one of the places that you really see people and what really brings out their true self is when they're behind the wheel of a car or they're in any kind of traffic. And I just wanted to share with you a couple of experiences that I had this week. So I was on Wanamaker. I was you guys know where the Starbucks is on Wanamaker across from Hy-Vee? So I'm a little bit ahead on my route. I've just picked something up down at Walgreens at 37th and Wanamaker, and I'm heading to the north towards 29th Street. And there was a man that is walking on the side of the road. He's right at the edge of the road, and I'm going to turn right into Starbucks because I like to get an iced tea at Starbucks. So I'm going to take a right into Starbucks, and I'm going to run in real quick and pick up a tea. And there's this guy, and he's walking right by the edge of the road. And he, I guess, thought that at any point you can just cross a road and all the other cars are supposed to stop. And I could see that he's not at a crosswalk, he's not at 29th Street, he's at Starbucks. And he's going to go across to Hy-Vee. So he just hangs a left in front of me, which I was kind of anticipating it because he kind of looked like he was going to do that, So he looks at me and waves, and I'm like, Godspeed be with you, brother, crossing that road, because it's like 5 o'clock, man. It's really heavy traffic, and he just starts walking out in front of cars. And cars are slamming on their brakes, and so I pull into Starbucks, and I get out of my vehicle to go inside and get this, and all I know is there's 2 cars that are stopped, and he's screaming at the top of his lungs at them, and a bunch of profanity and a bunch of cuss words are going between them, because he was angry that they weren't stopping. And he was, even though there's no crosswalk there, I guess because he was in the road, which they did well to stop, because I think running over a human is not a good choice. But there's just this anger, kind of this built up. Boy, you see it a lot with people. You ever got behind somebody and they don't go as soon as the light turns green, and then people just flip out. It's amazing the things that I see just being on the road as much as I am just in kind of a high traffic type area, and how people drive and their emotions and the anger that comes out when people are behind the wheel. And so I really felt like I wanted to talk about that a little bit, because it just seems like people are angry. You go on Facebook and boy, people are just kind of comments that are made and the anger that's being spewed. You just kind of see this built up tension that people have. And I get it, and I get being angry, and I want to say this, first of all, that I believe that anger is a God-given emotion. If you read the Bible, you see that there were multiple times where God was angry. Now, God being perfect cannot sin, so there's justifiable anger. He was angry with the people of Israel who he led out of Egypt, and when they built a golden calf. Remember, and Moses had gone up to the mount and he got the 10 Commandments, and he was angry. He was angry at the fact that they had abandoned him and that they had followed other gods. And, Moses intercedes for the people, and while many of them suffer and many of them die, he does spare his complete annihilation of them. But he was angry with them. He was frustrated with them. Jesus modeled this himself for us, did he not? When Jesus went to the temple, and you remember what was going on at the temple. In the temple, they had these money changers because people would travel great distances to come to the temple. They didn't want to bring their cattle with them. They didn't want to bring their sheep with them or their doves or whatever they needed to purchase to sacrifice. They didn't want to bring those with them. So they would wait, and they would get to the temple, and they would buy the lambs there, and they would buy the doves there, and they would buy the different animals there. And it was just this huge racket. It was this money-making machine. And so people would come and they'd bring their currency. Well, they have to get Jerusalem currency. They don't have the right currency. So the exchange rates would be 4 times what it should be. And then they would have to buy these animals to take into the temple to sacrifice, and they were marked up by 10 times what they should be. I mean, does anybody else in the room get frustrated when you go to a game and you pay $9 for a Diet Coke? And you're like, I could buy 3 12-packs of these, right? But you're like, they got you in the, what are you going to do? If you want it, you got to pay it, right? And that's kind of what was happening here, where they were paying these extravagant prices. And let me ask you, so if you've been ripped off 2-3 times before you ever get into worship, what's worship going to be like? You're going to be frustrated. It's not going to be the experience that God intended for it to be. So it made Jesus angry. And what did he do? He got a whip, and he flipped the money changer tables over, and he ran them out of the temple. And he says, this is a house of prayer, a house of worship, and you have made it a den of thieves. And he ran them out. What was Jesus? He was angry. So anger in itself is not a sin. The issue is with uncontrolled anger. The issue is with just spewing stuff that comes to your mind. So Proverbs deals a ton with this issue of anger. So I want to give you some keys, or there's some keys that we find in the book of Proverbs to deal with our anger, to control our anger. 5 keys to control our anger found in the book of Proverbs. All right, so this is a God-given emotion that's not bad, because if anger spurs you to action in a positive way, it's a good thing. But anger that's out of control, what does the Bible say? Be angry and sin not. So there is a line that we can cross where we get out of control. We want to make sure that we don't cross that line. So let me give you the 5 things, and we'll look at different verses in Proverbs that deal with this issue of anger. All right. Number 1, how can I control my anger? 1 is recognize the seriousness of uncontrolled anger. Recognize the seriousness of uncontrolled anger. So what the writers of Proverbs do is they lay out 3 things that are the byproducts of uncontrolled anger. So if you have uncontrolled anger, if your anger is not under control as Jesus's was, then it's going to result in 3 things. 1, uncontrolled anger produces bad decisions. All right, so a couple of verses. Proverbs 14:17. A quick-tempered man acts foolishly. You ever watch somebody lose their cool? And you ever step back and you're not losing your cool, you're watching them lose their cool, and you're like, well, you're embarrassing yourself. You're acting the fool, right? So a quick-tempered man acts foolishly. Proverbs 14:29. He who is impulsive exalts folly. So this is kind of what I would call the lesser of the of the reasons to recognize the seriousness of uncontrolled anger, because it just produces bad decisions. They may not be sin, but they may just be some poor decisions that we will later regret. Okay? So you get upset, you act a fool, and it just kind of embarrasses the family, or you embarrass yourself. And how many of us in this room could look back and say, man, did I make a fool of myself? We all have, right? I mean, I have, you have, we all have. We all have things we look back on and we got in the moment. We were upset. We were angry. We said some stuff we regretted. We tend to often do this with the people that we love and care about the most. And we just make bad decisions because we get emotional. And we let our emotions drive us. And when we let our emotions drive us, we often make bad decisions. I'm not anti-emotion. I think emotions are God-given. But to live based on your emotions is a mistake. Because if you just do what you feel like doing, it will lead to some poor decisions. It oftentimes leads in regret, and this is one of those. So uncontrolled anger produces bad decisions. Uncontrolled anger not only does that, but it also leads to sin. So Proverbs 29:22 says this, "An angry man stirs up strife, and a furious man abounds in transgression." So uncontrolled anger leads to sin. So it's not just you're kind of making a fool of yourself. Now you're doing things that are violation of the Word of God. This is why Jesus always dealt with the core of the issues, not so much the external. Remember when he said, these religious guys were so proud of themselves because they had never committed adultery. And Jesus said, if you look at a woman to lust after you've committed adultery in your heart, what was he saying? It starts somewhere. You've got to, as Barney Fife would say, nip it in the bud, right? Okay? You've got to get to it at the core. You've got to get down to the foundation. So it's one thing to say, well, I've never committed adultery. But if you have a lust problem, that needs to be dealt with. Because if you don't take care of the lust problem, it's going to lead to adultery. Okay? The same thing is true. Well, Jesus said, people said, well, I've never murdered anybody. Okay, but if you're angry at somebody without a cause, you've already started that process. What happens with a lot of people? Do you ever watch 2020? Like every Saturday night it comes on at 9, and it's all about murders and depressing things before you go to bed at night. But a lot of times it's a lot of murders and different crimes against people, crimes against one another. It's crimes of passion. So they get angry, and the anger boils up, and then it leads to death. It leads to you doing something that you later regret. Isn't that the first murder in the Bible? Right? You have Cain and Abel, and you have Cain offers a sacrifice that is not accepted by God. Abel offers one that is. It ticks Cain off, so he kills his brother. Now, I don't know what led to all that, because the Bible doesn't fill in the spaces for us, but we know that you can just, I don't know if Abel was kind of rubbing it in like, God took mine, not yours, I mean, brothers could be that way, right? So I don't know if there's a little bit of that going on. I don't know what Cain just was angry at God, so he took out his frustration on his brother because he accepted his, but that's ultimately what led to the murder of Abel, because Cain's anger got out of control. So that's the first murder in the Bible. So we've got to recognize the seriousness of it, because uncontrolled anger will lead to sin. And then the third thing is uncontrolled anger destroys relationship. So as it says in Proverbs 29:22, it also says in Proverbs 15:18, a wrathful man stirs up strife. So I guess if the goal of your life is to be by yourself for the rest of your life, then you stir up strife. You react in anger. But if you really want to have people in your life for the rest of your life, a good thing to do is to get your anger under control. Because who likes being around the angry guy? Huh? You ever been around somebody that's blown to that's prone to blow their top. You ever like, oh, it's like tiptoeing through the tulips, right? I mean, it's like, oh boy, let's not step on a landmine. Well, who wants to be around that all the time? So what do people do? They start to isolate themselves from us because they don't want to, they never know what you're going to do. They never know what you're going to say. They never know how you're going to respond. They don't want to be embarrassed in front of their family or friends. So it makes everything awkward. And so we tend to push those kind of people away. And what I believe that the book of Proverbs is trying to teach us is, you want to get your anger under control. Okay, step back and recognize if my anger is out of control, I'm going to look like the fool. It's going to cause me to make bad decisions. It's going to lead me to sinning, and it's going to destroy my relationships. So you've got to magnify the consequences of it in your mind. So things have to become more important to you than they currently are. So I want to recognize the seriousness of uncontrolled anger. It's kind of cute when a little baby throws a temper tantrum. It's not so cute when a 45-year-old does. It's just not a good look. And so we've got to recognize the seriousness of uncontrolled anger. So that's one of the ways we step back. We see it as poison to our bodies, poison to our relationships. So that's the first thing we need to do to get control of our anger, is recognize the seriousness of it. 2, the second thing that we learn in Proverbs is to reflect before reacting. Reflect before reacting. Proverbs 29:11. Let's read it together. You ready? A fool vents all his... But okay. What was somebody said once? One of the presidents, I believe. And I don't think it was Abraham Lincoln. He gets credited for a lot of stuff that he never said. But anyway, is it if you're angry, count to 10? If you're really angry, count to 100 before you react? That's pretty good advice. Now, we live in a time where you can write a lot of emails and then you can delete them before you send them. So I heard one, I think it was John Adams who was our second president, who said that he would always, when he was upset, he would always write 2 letters. He'd write one that he wanted to send and one that he should send. And I think that's good. That's a good thing to do, is to reflect before reacting. Don't just fire off the text. And that's one of the issues. Communication was much slower 100 or even 50 years ago. How about 20 years ago, right? You'd write a letter, and man, I don't even know how to write now. I mean, everything's keyboard or on my phone, so you had a lot of time to kind of think through this. Now we can respond so quickly. We can instantly respond. We can give somebody instant feedback. We don't have to wait till the mailman comes tomorrow. So you must learn in your life to kind of get a governor on your life and say, okay, I'm going to think about this. I'm not going to respond right away. I'm going to give this some thought. I'm not going to respond in the emotions that I feel in the moment, because this would not be healthy. I want to make sure that what I'm going to say is from God. Now, I understand there's times where that's impossible to do, but I just want to challenge you. Don't feel the pressure to respond to every text right away. Don't feel the pressure to respond to every email right away. In many instances, give yourself 24 hours to at least think about it and let your emotions run their course a little bit until you respond. And this is what it's really telling us to do. A fool, you know what's on his mind because it comes out his mouth. But a wise man holds them back. A wise man thinks before he speaks. Number 3, the third thing that Proverbs teaches us that helps us kind of get control of our anger is to reorganize. One of the things that I can do is reorganize my priorities. Reorganize my priorities. Proverbs 19:11, the discretion of a man makes him slow to anger, and his glory is to overlook a transgression. Proverbs 16:32, he who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes the city. Now, this is how I want to challenge you to look at anger, okay? Look at anger in the sense that anger is a great indicator of what is a priority in my life, what I get angry about. All right, so let me give you a personal example for me. So I'm a baseball fan. And sadly, right now, I'm a Kansas City Royals fan. You know, it was real good a couple of years ago, but I am a Kansas City Royals fan. So, and so I invest a lot of time and energy into the Royals, in a sense. You know, I read the articles about them, and I listen to the games. And when I get home from work, I often watch the games. And one of the signs that the Royals are becoming too much of a priority in my life is I find myself getting angry. And what I mean by that is, you know, Ned Yost brings some guy in out of the bullpen, and I'm like, why is he bringing him in? You know, I'm like venting to Karen, like, what is he bringing this guy in for? And I can't believe this guy's on the bench. Why isn't he bringing up this hitter and blah, 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 right? You guys know what I'm talking about? I mean, maybe you don't understand that because you don't like sports, but I'll just hear myself talking and I'll go, all right, this is too big a deal. So I don't know what that is for you, but it's something for you. And you got to be able to check yourself and go, okay, man, I'm getting entirely too fired up about this. You know, a sign oftentimes that that I'm becoming too selfish is, like I get mad. I'm driving my car and somebody pulls out in front of me and I have to slam on my brakes or I have to adjust my pattern when I'm driving. And, you know, I find myself getting angry at them. Well, what's that doing to me? It's just saying, you think that this entire planet is here for you. Right? It's just this big warning light going off that I'm freaking out of this person in front of me because how dare you pull out in front of me? Don't you know who I am? And that's really, in a sense, what I'm saying, right? Don't you know who I am? And how dare you pull out in front of me? And I'm more important than you because you obviously don't know that I have places to go. And what that always does for me is when I find myself getting really angry about that, it's like, wow, I think selfishness is too big a deal in my life. I'm too big a deal. And so it's always a warning sign to me when I find myself getting frustrated with Karen because she won't see things my way. Come on, Karen. And what's that? It's pride. I'm a firm believer that my greatest issues and all of our greatest issues is pride and selfishness. It'll bring us down, man. So when I want to actually see what makes me angry, because what makes me angry is an indicator of what is a priority in my life. It's what I'm passionate about. So when the Royals have become too much of a priority in my life, then there's nothing wrong with being excited and enjoying the game, but when I can't watch a game without getting ticked off, then that's a problem. It's a game. Nothing eternal hinges on it. Nothing. Now, I know I get the managers and players, it's their livelihood, it's a big deal. But what it just says to me is, Mark, you need to reevaluate your priorities because they're out of whack when you're getting angry about things that don't matter. Or you get angry about things that affect you and you alone. So reorganize my priorities, and then when you'll find yourself getting angry about the right things. Number 4, the fourth thing that we learn in Proverbs is to relate to people who are patient. How can I get control of my anger? Relate to people who are patient. Pretty strong language in 24, right? Make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man do not go, lest you learn his ways and set a snare for your soul. So be very careful to associate with people who are patient. Whether you like it or not, you become who you hang around. So choose your friends and choose your associates carefully. Karen and I will celebrate in a month 29 years that we've been together. And look, it's freaky scary how much we have become alike and how we think alike and how and because we've just been together for so long. Poor Karen, whether she has to deal with it or not, I've rubbed off on her and she has rubbed off on me. That's just human nature. That's who we become, who we hang around. So you want to make sure in your life that you relate with people who are patient. That you relate with people who have their anger and their temper under control. Who kind of model it for you. And that's what the psalmist or the writer of Proverbs is encouraging us to do. And then number 5, and to me this is the most important one. How can I get control of my anger? Rely on God's power. Rely on God's power. So Proverbs 14:29, let's read it together. He who is slow. Okay, now how do I get great understanding? I get great understanding from God. If you have a temper problem, you know how difficult it is to control it. In fact, it may be impossible. But I can do all things through who? Through Christ who strengthens me. So it takes great understanding to acknowledge the fact that you need God's help. So, how is a person saved? A person is saved by acknowledging they can't earn their way to God. By acknowledging the fact that they are sinners that fall short of the glory of God. So what do? They throw themselves at the mercy of Jesus, right? They repent of their sins and they throw themselves at the mercy of Jesus, and we ask Him to save us and give us everlasting life. How does a person deal with his anger issues? The same way. She acknowledges that in their own strength, they cannot deal with this anger issue. They repent of the sins that have come as a result of this, and they throw themselves at the mercy of Jesus. And they ask for His strength and His power to do the right thing. It's supernatural. Sometimes, sermons like I preached this morning kind of backfire on me in the sense that people feel condemnation because they haven't been this way to their mother, and it really backfired on this one lady today. And she came up to me and she's really upset, and she's like, "I've been a horrible mother, and I was a horrible mother to my mom, and I've been I've been a horrible daughter to my mom, and I've been a horrible mother to my children," and she just feels this waves and waves of condemnation. And I'm like, man, this is not what I meant the sermon to be. And she's like, I know you say that everything's under the blood and it's covered by Christ, but I don't feel that. So obviously she needs a lot of help and counseling, but really at the core of it, man, only God can take away that guilt. Only God can give her peace that passes what? All understanding. And I just think anger is the same way. I think that you can try harder, but you're just going to fail. You need supernatural help. And who can give us that supernatural help? God can. God, the Holy Spirit, can empower you to do the right thing. So you can overcome your anger issues if you rely on God's power. Because greater is He that is in us than he that is in the world, right? So, anger is a power. I don't know of anybody that doesn't get anger. I mean, I don't know of anybody that's emotionless. Anger is a good thing. It's a good thing when it fires you up for the right thing. But it can get out of control. So keep it under control by recognizing the seriousness of uncontrolled. Think about, okay, if I lose it here, who is this going to hurt? What is this going to destroy the trust that I have with people, the relationship that I have with people? Think it through. So it requires us to step back and reflect before reacting. Don't send that text in anger. Don't send that email in anger. Don't respond to that phone call in anger. Give it some time. Give it 24 hours. Think about it. Somebody's often said that you should never make a major decision within 24 hours. But give it some thought. Reorganize my priorities. Anger is a sign of what's important to me, and maybe I'm too important to me. Maybe I don't have the mind of Christ, which is to look on others and not on myself. So I get angry at you because you're not seeing things my way. That's a sign that my priorities are out of whack. So maybe I need to do some soul searching and some changes in my life, reorganizing my priorities. I want to relate to people who are patient. I want to hang around those who have their anger under control. And most importantly, if I want to see victory in my life, I want to rely on God's power. Because I can get my anger under control with God's help.